Hey folks, recently I mentioned that I've been working on getting all my crafting and gathering jobs up to level 90, and, well, I accomplished that goal. I finally finished off all my crafters, and I'm done. But not really. I actually decided that I was going to take it one step further, and recently I've been working on getting every single fish in Endwalker. And over the course of this long journey, which took me the past few days, I feel like I've learned pretty much everything there is to learn about fishing in this new expansion. So I've decided to make this guide, which should go over everything that you'll need to know, be it from what fish can be reduced, to what fish are collectibles, to what you need for Levequests, or what you need for Studium Deliveries. So that is going to be covered at some point in this video. Just check the timestamps, and I'm sure I'll have broken it down. Also, this should go without saying, but there are going to be minor spoilers throughout this video for, like, zone names, and of course, I'll be showing the actual zones and the fishing holes. So if you haven't finished the MSQ and you don't want to have that spoiled for you, then don't watch this video. But other than that, I'm not actually spoiling story beats, it's just the actual physical locations of the zones themselves. Now, with that out of the way, I think we can jump into the guide, and the first thing that I want to discuss is what has actually changed. So, I'm going to go through all of the fishing changes from Shadowbringers to Endwalker. I will not be doing a detailed ability breakdown for everything within fishing. I'm assuming that you at least know a basic amount of fishing, like up to a Shadowbringers level, before watching this video. This is going to cover only what has changed. And speaking of what has changed, the first thing we have is Chum, which has been reduced from 145 GP to 100. And it also had its level requirement reduced, but it doesn't really matter. Chum was never a very important ability, and it still isn't right now. Next, we have Fish Eyes, and this now has no effect on legendary fish, fish found when ocean fishing, or any fish introduced from Shadowbringers onward. I'm fairly certain that this was already the case, but I think now they're just clarifying that this is how it works. So, Veteran Trade, now this just prevents you from catching the same fish you just caught, and it has no effect on some fish. This is more of a Spearfishing Rework thing, which I will discuss in a little bit. And Nature's Bounty now makes it so you catch a large-sized fish on your next spearfishing attempt rather than a high-quality fish. Because if you weren't aware, they removed high-quality gathering materials entirely. Be it fish, or botany, or mining. All of that is gone. Now for fishing, it is large fish instead of high quality. So across the board, this is something that was changed, but in this ability specifically, that is how they reworded it. Also for fishers, their Golai trait was consolidated all into one. It doesn't really change anything. You can still detect any fishing hole at your level or below, but it is in the patch notes, so I figured I'd mention it. Also, as far as removed abilities go, we only had a few, and none of them are significant. It really just has to do with the Spearfishing Rework, and I will explain that in a bit more detail shortly. Now, as for new abilities, I'm going to actually start with the traits first, because I think it'll make more sense if I do it this way. And the first thing we get is Angler's Art, which you get at level 15, and it gives you a chance to gain a stack of Angler's Art upon landing a large-sized fish. This has a maximum stacks of 10, and the chance of being granted Angler's Art differs between fishing and spearfishing. In my experience, you are guaranteed to get a stack of Angler's Art if you catch a large fish, but if you spear a large fish, you only have a chance to gain it. So, not entirely sure if that's how it works, but that is what I've been experiencing. Now, you also get Enhanced GP Regeneration 3. Pretty straightforward. You get more GP regeneration over time. And lastly, we have Starfishing, which you get at level 89, and this allows you to cast your line into space. At the moment, though, only 3 of the fishing holes in the final zone are actually starfishing nodes, so this isn't really a big thing, it's just a minor subset of the fishing holes in the final zone. Now, for actual abilities, we have first Thaliak's Favor, which you get at level 15, and this is one of the new things that interacts with that Angler's Art trait that we mentioned earlier. This restores 150 GP, and it requires you to spend 3 of your Angler's Art. In my experience, this is the best thing to use your Angler's Art on. It's just, every once in a while, you'll be able to restore some GP, and it's pretty good. Really, nothing much to discuss with that. We also have Makeshift Bait, which allows the execution of mooch even with average-sized fish. The problem with this one is it costs 5 Angler's Art, and there's an ability that we'll discuss later that kind of invalidates this, so this is okay, but I wouldn't actually recommend using it in pretty much any situation. Vital Sight you get at level 64, and this sharpens your vision, making fish easier to target. This is for spearfishing, and it is kind of crap, but, I did want to at least mention it. Bated Breath is at level 75, and this makes you hold your breath and reduce the wariness of nearby fish while spearfishing. This is incredibly good, and it will be something that I will heavily mention while we are discussing spearfishing. Prize Catch is a new ability at level 81, and this guarantees that the next fish that you catch while actually fishing will be a large-sized fish. This is the thing that I mentioned that kind of invalidates Makeshift Bait. Makeshift Bait will make it so you can mooch off even normal-sized fish, but Prize Catch, if you use this on every single fishing attempt, will make it so you always catch a large fish, meaning you can always mooch, so there's effectively no reason to use Makeshift Bait. It's better to just spam Prize Catch, and then use your Angler's Art on Thaliak's favor to restore the GP that you've been spending on Prize Catch. I guess this might be a personal preference thing, but I've had far more success with that strategy than I've had using Makeshift Bait. Next, we have Electric Current, which is a level 85 ability, and this is, once again, a spearfishing thing where after you get a combo of 10, you can electrify the water and capture all fish present in your field of vision. This is a solid ability, but I don't really think it matters that much. It's, if anything, just a nice little finisher once you've already cleared out your spearfishing node. Just gives you that little bit of extra fish to catch. And finally, we have Triple Hook, a level 90 ability, which hooks 3 or more fish in a single cast. This is something that you will rarely ever use because it's only available for some fish, and generally speaking, not the good ones, and you also can't even determine exactly what you're getting on your next fish. So it's really just, if you know that any of the fish in your node are going to be good, you can pop this, and I guess it gets you 3 casts in one. I personally don't think it's good, but I'm sure some people will find a use for it. So before I get any further in the guide, I do want to take a moment to explain spearfishing because it was changed pretty heavily going from Shadowbringers to Endwalker. I know most people have probably figured it out already, but I do want to take at least some time to explain it because I'd imagine some people are still a little bit confused. And before you click on the Teeming Waters, as always, you want to make sure you have Collector's Glove on. This is very important. Without it, you won't be able to get any reducible or collectible fish, so make sure you have that enabled. Then if I click on the Teeming Waters, you'll notice it's a completely different UI. So, main thing to know with spearfishing is there are 3 different types of fish: large fish, medium fish, and small fish. Every single fish also has its own speed. So you'll have fast large fish or slow large fish, and then basically 2 types of every single one. So here we have 2 of the exact same fish. Both of them are slow small. This is a slow medium, and the best one that I'm looking for is actually a fast medium. So I'll see if I can get that to pop up. Boom, there we go. That is a Guild Top Knot. Every single fast medium that I find on the screen will be a Guild Top Knot. Also, you'll notice that this wariness bar is increasing over time. If I press this button, Bated Breath, it costs 300 GP and it reduces that bar. That is the only way to reduce your wariness. Wariness is something that just slowly increases as you spend more time in a spearfishing window, and as you catch more fish, it also increases, depending on how many fish you catch. Now, the last thing worth mentioning for spearfishing is this combo that we see at the top left. So that is the catch with the number next to it. This is pretty straightforward. It keeps track of how many fish in a row that you've been able to catch. But I actually think that this kind of baits people a little bit, because it doesn't really matter. You know, a lot of people may think that, oh, you get better fish by keeping this combo up, but it doesn't work like that. It just lets you use Electric Current. That's it. That ability I just used, that is the only advantage to keeping this combo up. It doesn't even go past 10. So, unless you really, really want to use Electric Current, there is basically no incentive to constantly spear fish. All you need to do is just sit there, wait, get the fish that you want, and then you're good to go. So if I just want to get those Guild Top Knots, and I know that Guild Top Knots are the fast medium fish, then it's better for me to just sit here, not worry about any of these small fish scrolling across my screen, just kind of wasting wariness effectively, because the moment that thing pops up, boom, Guild Top Knot. Another one, missed the second because I didn't have time, but there, 3 Guild Top Knots. And now I just don't need to catch anything else. There was a Guild Top Knot there though, so might as well catch it, but I can just let my combo decay. No Guild Top Knots, doesn't matter. I don't need to maintain that combo. It kind of is a little bit of a weird system in that regard, but that is pretty much everything you need to know about spearfishing in Endwalker. Now that we've gone over the spearfishing changes and all of the general ability changes in Endwalker, I think it's time to discuss the Levequests, which I would imagine is what most people are going to be using to actually level their fishing. I'm also going to be discussing Studium Deliveries, as this is kind of just like an advanced version of Levequests, so that will be after I do all of the regular Levequests. But Starting off for the level 80 leaf quests, we have Crabs for the Crabby, and it requires us to get crabs in Northern Onokoro. And these can be found right up here, and it's Ruby Spotted Crab. So Northern Onokoro, just above this Aetheryte point, Ruby Spotted Crab, pretty easy. The second one is Fish for Thought. This is from a small pond of tranquility, and it is located in the reflecting pool in Old Sharlayan. This thing right here, Ponderer. For level 82, we have Fishing for the Future, which the first one is Southern Achiali. You can find this pretty easily in this spot right here, Southern Achiali, and it is the Giant's Gall Jaw. This is actually the spot that I mentioned in my previous video, and it's a great place to farm Moonlight Ether Sand with Guild Topknot, but I'll discuss that more later. The next leaf quest is Waterworks, and this can be found in Labyrinthos, the river to the southwest of the Archeon. And that would be the Mover Beta, and you can get the Macrobrachium Lar in this location right here, and that will finish your leaf quest. For level 84, we have What Would You Do for a Pickle, which is in Eastern Isari, located in the Ruby Sea. Once again, we pop over to the Ruby Sea, and we can get it from Isari Slope, Dream Pickle right here. Now, it is worth noting that the Dream Pickle also drops from the Shadow Depths, which can spawn in northwestern Onokoro, so if you do want to farm up here, you can get Dream Pickle in this location too. It isn't just in the Isari Slope. Next up, we have Making Waves, and this requires you to go to the Giant's Gull Grounds, which is found in northern Thavnair. You're tasked with getting this fish, a bluegill, and you need 3 of them. Now, for 86, we have Simple as Salt. This is pretty much the only time that Lochs is relevant, but there is one new node there, Lochs Northeastern Lakebed, and you need to get this thing, Salt Squid, 9 of them. Next up, we have Fungi of the Firmament, and this is actually on the moon. So if I go over to Sea of Stars, and I go over to the Chlorospond, we can find Protomike number 987, and that is what you need to get for this leaf quest. And the last 2, What's in the Air, requires you to get stuff from the Font of Maya and Thavnair. And you will find that right here. This is the big pool of water with the big elephant head on it. But like I said, we'll see it in person later on. And last but not least, we have Plumbing the Past, which requires you to fish from dark waters of ancient origin. And you need to get Colosoma. And this is just a fancy way of saying Elpis, and you need to get Colosoma here from the Lower Hungering Gardens. That covers every single location for leave quests, but we still need to talk about Studium Deliveries because that's something which is pretty important for most people. So, to kick things off, we have Giant Ether Louse, which you catch from Unmoved Source Alpha. That is this thing right here, and it is the place right next to the entrance. So, you enter Labyrinthos, you take a quick left over here, and then boom, you can fish it right there. Next up, we have Garjana Ross, and that is from the Great Runoff, which is located right here in Thavnair. It is this thing right here. Basically, you hit the Aetheryte, you fish right off the dock, and you're good to go. Next, we have Garlean Clam. This is found in the Eblan Thaw, which is, once again, right next to the Aetheryte in Camp Broken Glass. Just head over there, make sure to turn on your Collector's Glove for all of these. As always, probably should have mentioned that before, but I just remembered it. But it is worth noting that if you feel like it, you can also go up to the Stainless Course, and Garlean Clam does drop from this node as well. Next, we have Alnaran Salmon, and that is found off Kisarota, which is the big river coursing through Eastern Thavnair. It won't actually show up on any of these things because it is a special quest fish, but it does drop off this section right here. Next, we have Smaragdos, and that is found in the World Unsunder at Leith. It's this one right here. You're going to need to use, I believe, a Sky Spoon lure, and you just go to any of the parts of the water in this island right here, and you'll be able to catch Smaragdos. And last but not least, we have Lunar Lamenter. That is, of course, on the moon, as the name would imply. It is down by the Frozen Fisher, and similarly to the Alnarian Salmon, it does not actually show up on this list because it's a special quest fish, but you will be able to catch it in the Frozen Fisher. So that covers everything for the Studium Deliveries, and at this point, there's really nothing else to do but just dive into every single location for every single fish. And I do want to say, before I dive into this, I'm going to be just naming off a lot of fish, because the reality of Final Fantasy fishing is that most of them are just not very important. You're going to have a lot of garbage fish that aren't really relevant. There are only some that actually matter, be it for crafting, for Levequests, or for ethereal reduction, and if that is the case, then I will mention them. But if they are just completely worthless and aren't really used for anything, then I'll skip over them. And some of these technically aren't completely worthless. Some of them can be used for Grand Company provisioning missions, but that covers like 75% of them, and that's all they're used for, so if you really care about that, just look it up. I'll just quickly go over all the important ones and then just name off the rest without actually bringing up, oh, this is a randomly cycling Grand Company provision mission. For our first area, we of course have Old Sharlayan, and the first fishing hole is Scholar's Harbor. This is any bit of ocean that is within Old Sharlayan, so that far section of the docks, that's Scholar's Harbor. That far section of the docks, that's also Scholar's Harbor. Even this little river that goes underneath that bridge, still Scholar's Harbor. And being an ocean area, it requires ocean bait such as shrimp ball or mackerel strip on the high ends. Just note for future reference, any sort of ocean fishing area, you can assume that this is the bait you'll be using. I'm not going to repeat it every single time, but every single zone in Endwalker, the lowest level bait that you can use for oceans is shrimp ball, and the highest level bait you can use is mackerel strip. Now, as for the fishing log itself, for Scholar's Harbor, we have pecten, northern herring, dog-faced puffer, cobalt chromis, and guitarfish. Most of these are fairly unimportant, but northern herring, it is worth noting, is used as a crafting material for some of the level 80 culinarian recipes, so this will actually fetch a decent price on the market board. Next up, we have the Oinops, which covers this entire river on the western side of Sharlayan, and it covers the river on the eastern side of Sharlayan. So any fresh water that is coursing through this area counts as Oinops. It's a pretty large area, just like Scholar's Harbor. And in here, you can catch Asticus, peacock bass, academician, and swordspine snook. Nothing really good, but it is, of course, worth mentioning. And finally, we have the Reflecting Pool, which is what I would imagine that most people are missing for their Old Sharlayan fishing log. This is on the western edge. It's just close to the Baldessian Annex section over there, and in the fishing log, we find that we can catch Asticus, Ponderer, and Tidal Dahlia. So, as previously mentioned, this is used in one of the Levequests, so a lot of people are gonna have to come here if they plan on leveling fishing through that. Next up, we have Labyrinthos, and our first spot will be Unmoved Source Alpha. So, this, like every single other source in Labyrinthos, is actually a freshwater site. So that means you'll be using either Gold Salmon Roe at the low end or Mayfly at the high end. Unlike ocean fishing, there's actually a lot of lures in between. So it goes Gold Salmon Roe, Leech, then Sky Spoon Lure, and finally Mayfly. Any of these work for Unmoved Source Alpha, and most of the other zones. Deep Moat is the only somewhat high-level zone, but I'll get to that later. But Unmoved Source Alpha is one of the first ones you're going to get. In it, you can find Butterfly Fry, Top Minnow, Tessera, Giant Ether Louse, the aforementioned Studium Delivery fish, and Fat Snook. Most of these, aside from the Ether Louse one, are pretty unimportant. They aren't really used in any major recipes, and to my knowledge, none of them are collectibles. So, not a super important point, this Unmoved Source Alpha. And as you might notice, it covers this entire lake, but the moment we get to this section down here, we fall into the next area, which is the Mover Alpha. So the Mover Alpha is this entire river, the lower section, going down into Deep Moat. But as long as you're within this river, you're in the Mover Alpha. And in here, you can find, once again, Butterfly Fry, Proclidosis luminosus, probably butchered that, but whatever, Xenocyprus, Mesonata, and Greengill Salmon. Once again, nothing super impressive from this area. Next up, we have Deep Moat, and this is probably the most important fishing spot within Labyrinthos because it is home to the first of our Tome of Ithacological Folklore fish, the Labyrinthos tilapia. Now, you can't just directly catch this, you first need to catch an Asticus aetherius, and then you need to mooch that in order to get a shot at the Labyrinthos tilapia. Also, thanks to the Final Fantasy Fishing Discord, we know that you can only catch this between 8 a.m. and 4 p.m. Eorzea time. So if you go into the top right of your screen, you'll see your little clock here. I currently have it set to Eorzea time. You can click on it to swap it, so you can swap between local time, server time, and then, of course, Eorzea time. You're pretty much always going to want to have it on Eorzea time because that is the most important for most things profession related. I would imagine that most people know this, but in case somebody here is new to professions, I figured I'd let you in on that little trick because that is important not just for fish, but also for spawn times of any other folklore node, such as the ones from mining and botany. Also, in Deep Moat, you can catch butterfly fry and xenokypris, but those are zone-wide fish, so not really important. Mostly you're going to be here for the Astacus aetherius and the Labyrinthos tilapia, but I figured I'd mention it. And as far as how far this extends, it pretty much covers the entire water area and this entire, well, moat. And you can fish here by standing on this little cliff ledge, and the moment you go up to it, boom, you are now casting your line in the Deep Moat. But if you want to be really cool, then you should be fishing over here by the gigantic water wheel. Next, we have the Mover Beta, and that covers this entire section. So you can see it's this entire river over here, and it's also this little river over here. It's hard to see from here, but there's a little stretch of water on the eastern side of it too. It's a pretty large area. Anything that falls within this giant circle counts for the Mover Beta. And within it, you can catch butterfly fry, macrobrachium lar, xenokypris, blowgun, and darksteel knifefish. As mentioned earlier, the macrobrachium lar is important because it's used for one of the Levequests, but the other ones are not super important. And finally, we come to the unmoved source beta, and this is actually a pretty important fishing spot. It is this lake right here, and within it you can find butterfly fry, ryamas, not going to try to pronounce that a second time, xenokypris, and red bowfin. Red bowfin is the really important one here because, as you can see, it is reducible. Now, it's not amazing. It reduces into Moonlight Ether Sand, and there is a better farming spot for Moonlight Ether Sand, as mentioned before, with the guild top knots, but it is a nice way to get Moonlight Ether Sand if you prefer regular fishing over spearfishing. For some reason. I don't know why you would. Spearfishing's awesome. But I do think it is important to note that red bowfin can be reduced and it can be caught in the unmoved source beta. For our next zone, we have Thavnair, and a quick note on Thavnair, this is actually the only Endwalker spot that has spearfishing, so I am not going to be going into both the spearfishing and the regular fishing stuff in the same section. I'll be doing all of the regular fishing nodes first, and then I will be doing all of the spearfishing nodes. So that will be all after this. First, we're going to talk about all of the normal fishing holes within Thavnair. Also, Harlan from the future chiming in really quick, I forgot to actually mention whether or not the spots were ocean fishing or freshwater fishing, so real quick, Yedlimod, Thavnairian Coast, Great Runoff, Perfume Tides are all ocean fishing spots, Giant Skull Grounds, Wakeful Tirana, Pavana's Remorse, Kisarota, and Font of Maya are all freshwater fishing spots. So, sorry for actually forgetting to mention that before discussing each spot, but now let's get into the details on each one of these. Starting with Yedlimod. So this is basically right by the entrance to Thavnair when you come in from the MSQ, and it's not super impressive. It has a Thavnairian goby, a Keok sole, a gill crab, and a panther scale grouper. None of these are super important, but it is a nice little fishing spot. Right along this dock area, all of this stuff up until that land area right there is considered part of Yedlimod. And to the next area, we need go no further than just a little bit to the west, and that covers the Thavnairian Coast. This is a gigantic fishing spot. It's actually bigger than this little circle would imply. It is pretty much the vast majority of the ocean area within Thavnair. In this place, you can find Thavnairian goby, Keok sole, Fate's Design, Shadow Dart sardine, and Poxa fish. So this section right here covers not only this entire area, but pretty much the entire part of the ocean up north. So if I look in the fishing log, this entire spot between the Great Runoff and the Perfume Tides, this is all still part of the Thavnairian Coast. It is a pretty massive area. And for our next section, we have the Great Runoff. This is one of the spots that you're going to have to go to for the Studium Deliveries. It is the entire little bay area around this aetheryte, and within it you can catch, once again, Thavnairian goby, Keok sole, Garjana Ross, that is the Studium Delivery fish, and Golden Barramundi. Really, this is only important for that one Studium Delivery fish, otherwise it's relatively unremarkable. And as mentioned previously, this northern section is the Perfume Tides. You'll have to finnick around a little bit to find exactly where the Perfume Tides ends and the Thavnairian coast ends, but it's somewhere around this spot here. For the most part, though, anywhere in this northern section is the Perfume Tides, and this spot is pretty important because it has another folklore fish. But first, let's go over the other ones. So we have Fiery Goby, Puff Paya, Neuronarian octopus, roosterfish, and then our folklore fish, Basilosaurus. So in order to get a Basilosaurus, you first need to catch a Puff Paya, then you need to mooch the Puff Paya, and you have a chance of getting the Basilosaurus. And thanks to the Endwalker fishing Discord, we know that the Basilosaurus can be caught at any time, but it can only be caught during fair weather. Our next fishing spot is a relatively small one, and that is the Giant Skull Grounds. So I mentioned this one earlier. In here you can catch Kajaya's Castaway, Married Frog, Bluegill, and Bronze Papyra. Bluegill is one of the Levequest fish, so that's the only real reason you want to go here. The other ones aren't super important. Next up, we have the Wakeful Tirana, which is this entire lake area beneath this bridge. So it covers this little section over here and this little section over here. That's all part of the Wakeful Tirana. And within it, you will be able to catch Green Swordtail, Kiasarapayan, Wakeful Watcher, and Red Drum, which is a Tome of Ithacological Folklore fish. According to the Fishing Discord, this can be caught anytime in between 4 p.m. and midnight. And as usual, you need to have fair weather in order to catch it. Next, we have a small little pool in the eastern section of Thavnair, and that is Pavana's Remorse. So in this area, you can catch Green Swordtail, Rodsbullock, Half Moon Betta, and Banana Eel. And these are not super important. The next fishing area is pretty large. It is the Kisaroda River, and it courses through pretty much the entirety of this section of Thavnair. So if I go to the fishing log, it actually is located down here, but if I were to land right on this spot here and start fishing, it would say you cast your line at Kisaroda. So it covers a pretty large section. And in Kisaroda, I can catch Green Swordtail, Kasirapayan, Forge Flame, and Baikuda. None of them are super important. As mentioned earlier, one of the Studium Delivery things is here, but it is not listed because it is a special quest fish. And finally, we have the Font of Maya. This is the place with the giant elephant statue, and if I look at the fishing log, it has Green Swordtail, Rodsbullock, Handy Hamza, Flowerhorn, and Thavnairian Caiman. Once again, nothing super important here, but it is a cool little spot, and it actually does bring us nicely into the second section, which is Thavnairian Spearfishing, because if I dive into the water here, we have our first little section for spearfishing, which is, once again, the Font of Maya. So, if I go to my fishing log and I look at the spearfishing sections, in the Font of Maya, we can catch Agama's Palm, Rummy Nose Tetra, Monk's Blade, Atrama Chichlid, Root of Maya, and Floral Snakehead. So, nothing super important here, but it is nice that it's all in one little spot along with the fishing. Now, all of the other spearfishing spots are along the coast, and the first one we'll discuss is this, the Southern Great Runoff. So, within it, you can catch Satrap's Whisper, Mayhan Reveler, Shallow's Cod, and this one's quite important. It's actually used in quite a lot of culinarian recipes, so I've sold a bunch of these. It's actually not too bad to farm. Rossafish, Damir's Alloy, and Dusky Shark. This covers this entire section. There are 3 nodes. You can see them on the mini-map up here. This section isn't super important, though. Next, we have Southern Akyali. I've mentioned this a few times already. It is probably the best spearfishing spot, and within it, you can catch Thavnairian Cucumber, Spiny King Crab, Thavnairian Eel, Gill Topknot, Perusa Fish, and Giant Skull Jaw. So, as mentioned before, Giant Skull Jaw is used for one of the Levequests. Spiny King Crab is used in some culinarian recipes, so that could be pretty good too. But most importantly, Gill Topknot can be reduced into Moonlight Ether Sand. This is a fantastic farm spot. It's one that I've used multiple times since the start of this expansion. I even included it in a gill making guide that I made recently that is going to be in the description if that's something you're interested in. But one of the best ways to make gill with fishing right now is this spot right here and farming Gill Topknots. It's amazing. And it covers this little section. Now, the final two spots kind of go hand in hand, and the first one that I'm going to discuss is Western Achiali. So this spot itself is relatively unimportant. It has Achiali Sardine, Spicy Pickle, Mayavana, Hedon Fish, Satrap Trapfish, and Blue Marlin. None of these fish are particularly important. However, in order to unlock this final area, Outer Achiali, you need to get 10 Hedon fish within Western Achiali, and then once you've done that, it'll unlock the Swimming Shadows, which is the Outer Achiali's fishing spot, and within that, you can catch a few good fish. First off, we have Guild Topknot, we have Mayhan Reveler, and we have Shallow's Cod. As mentioned before, Shallow's Cod, pretty good selling for culinary and recipes. Dusky Shark, Ziphacacnus, and Tebkeik Smelt. I probably butcher those pronunciations, but whatever. Now, this is important for a few reasons. One, Guild Topknot and Shallow's Cod, as mentioned before, good fish. But Ziphinactus and Tebkeik Smelt are actually both collectible fish, and it's pretty nice to farm this and get all that stuff in one singular node. But the hard one to get here is the Tebkeik Smelt. In order to get this, you're going to need to catch 3 Dusky Sharks and 2 Ziphacacnus. I'm going to pronounce that a different way every single time. Bear with me. So once you actually get your 10 Hedon fish, you're going to go over to the Swimming Shadows. You're going to catch 3 Dusky Sharks and 2 Ziphinactus, and those are the big fish that swim across. After you're done with that, a small, really fast fish will dart across the screen. It's important that you catch it really quickly because by this time, you're probably going to be almost done with the node. And if you manage that, you'll get a Tebkeik Smelt. And then, boom, you can go turn that in for some scripts. But this is probably the most complicated fishing spot because not only do you have to unlock it, but then there is an unlockable fish within the unlockable spot. So I figured I'd give that little brief explanation. Sorry if it is a little bit complicated. Our next zone, if you can call it that, is Radz-At-Han. It's technically a city, but it is considered to be its own zone within the fishing log, so I wanted to treat it like that within the video. Now, Radz-At-Han is relatively small fishing-wise. It only has one area, and that is Megaduda. It is this little lake/river section right outside the palace, and in it there are 4 unique fish: the Trunk Blessed, Sima Duda, Long-Ear Sunfish, and Silver Caracan. So, nothing too special, but it is worth noting that it is the only fishing node within Radz-At-Han. And, well, our next actual zone is Garlemald. We aren't going to be here for long, because it actually only has 2 fishing spots. Starting with the Eblan Thaw, we have Garlean Clam, a Numulus, Eblan Trout, Cerule Core, and Ice Pike. So, Ice Pike is actually used in some fishing recipes, so it might be useful for that. The others aren't super important, but Garlean Clam is used in some of the Studium Deliveries. And for the other area, we have the Stainless Course, which is this big moat that stretches along the big citadel in Garlemald. It has, once again, a Garlean Clam, Dark Crown, Eblan Trout, Imperial Pleco, and Bluetail. So nothing super special here. You can get Garlean Clam in both nodes, and it is worth noting that both of them are freshwater areas, so you'll be using freshwater bait. And for our next zone, we have Mare Lamentorum, or in layman's terms, the Moon. And the first spot that we're going to be fishing at is this cave here, the Frozen Fissure. So this is the entrance, and in here you're going to be using etherochemical bait, or ether fishing, I guess it's called. There are multiple things that you can use for this. The low end is Grey Worm. The high end is Chimera Worm. This is used in 2 out of 3 of the fishing spots within Mare Lamentorum, so the Frozen Fissure uses it, and the Chlorospond uses it. The third fishing spot, Greatest Ensvale, we'll get to that later, but that is actually freshwater. So in the Frozen Fissure, you can catch Feverfish, Calicia, Fleeting Brands, and Regotoise. There's also a special quest fish for the level 90 quest, but as mentioned, that won't show up in the log here. The next spot I'll be discussing is actually Greatest Ensvale, because I want to leave the important one for last. And Greatest Ensvale is located in this section of the gigantic spaceship buried in the moon. It includes basically all of the water areas across the region, so that section you can fish in, that section over there you can fish in, everything here that has water you can fish in, and it's all counted as Greatest Endsvale. Once again, this is fresh water, and in it you can catch Star Blue Guppy, Lunar Chichlid, Tear Eye, and Repliriblah. Okay, let me try this again. Replipliraruku. Fuck, I give up. That thing. You can catch that thing there. None of these, to my knowledge, are extremely important, but you can catch them here. And the last area is the Chloros Fond, but since it's a little bit isolated, I'm going to show the surrounding area so you have a general idea on where to find it. So it's this little cave right behind me. I go in here, and there is a lot of water, or I guess, I don't know if you can call it water, like ether chemical stuff. I usually fish in this spot, but there are lots of different areas throughout this cave that you can fish at, and in it, you can find beaverfish, Palicia, Protomike number 987, which is used for one of the Levequests, and the important one, Lunar Deathworm, which is one of our Tome of Ithacological Folklore fish, and this can be turned in for purple scripts. And this thing not only looks terrifying, but is also kind of difficult to catch. Now, in order to catch this crazy thing, you're first going to need to catch a Calicia, then you're going to have to mooch that in order to get the Lunar Deathworm, and also, according to the Fishing Discord, you can only get this while the weather is fair, but there is, as far as I know, no time limit on it. Now, for Elpis, I'm going to do something a little bit different, and I'm actually going to start with what I consider to be the best area within the zone, and that is Rumination's Ramble. So this covers the entirety of this little floating island. It is a freshwater spot, just like the other two within Elpis, and in this area, you can catch Isle Skipper, Albino Loach, Irabanian, Golden Shiner, and a Tome of Ithacological Folklore fish, the Mangar. So the Mangar is one of the purple script fish, and in order to catch it, you're first going to need to get an Albino Loach, you're going to need to mooch that, and then you can finally catch a Mangar. But the thing that is significant about it is you can only catch it while it is cloudy, so it is actually the only type of fish in the Ithacological Folklore for this expansion that requires a certain weather type that is not fair. However, there is no time limit associated with it. Next, we have the Lower Hungering Gardens. That is this big pool of water, and within this area, you can catch Isle Skipper, Dermogenis, Irabanian, and Colosoma. So Colosoma, as mentioned earlier, is required for the level 88 Levequests for Fisher, but otherwise, this area is relatively unimportant. And finally, we come to Leith, and this covers any bit of water on this section of the floating island. Technically, it's still part of the same island, but if you look at the map, it's pretty distinct. They're technically like two little circles that are mushed together, so anything on this part of the circle is in the Leith category. And here you can catch, once again, Isle Skipper, Anthea, Irabanian, and the big one, Smaragdos. This is used for the Studium Deliveries. It has no use outside of that, but this is the one that I see the most confusion about. A lot of people online don't seem to be able to find where the Smaragdos is located. It can only be caught in this specific fishing hole, not Lower Hungering Gardens or Rumination's Ramble, but if you go here and you use a Sky Spoon lure, you should be able to get them at a pretty quick rate. And the last of the new Endwalker zones that we'll be discussing is Ultima Thule. And I did specifically say new Endwalker zones because there are two old zones with new fishing nodes that we'll be discussing after this one. But for Ultima Thule, there are quite a lot of fishing spots. The first one we'll be discussing is Apahelos 18 Gamma. Yes, I do know what that symbol means. I bet you didn't expect me to know that. And in here, you can catch Super String, Vacuum Shrimp, Star Eater, and Cosmic Noise. And this does use either fishing stuff, so you'll be using Grey Worm or Chimera Worm, as mentioned earlier. And the next spot that we're going to be discussing is this thing, Limni 18. Now, I looked it up. Apparently, Limni is like the ancient Greek word for shore. I don't really know if that's true, but like, if it is, that's impressive that they went that far to call it that. But anyways, so in Limni 18, you can catch Wormhole Worm, Unidentified Flying Biomass 2, Stophos Deca Octo, Class 24, Terrifying Way, which is an awesome name, by the way, Alien Mertone, and Monster Carrot. And if you want to fish here, as you can see, there's actually this guy fishing right now. You just go to the edge, any of these space sections in the bottom left corner, and you'll be able to fish in Limne 18. Now, this does require you to use space fishing bait, so that would be either Stardust or Panic Jig. What's interesting is that most things can be caught with either Stardust or Panic Jig, but there are some fish that can only be caught by one or the other. Now, I'm not going to go into detail, but you can look it up. It is just something that I thought was interesting and was worth noting. And next we have this little pool, which is Apahelos 18 Beta, and in here you can catch, once again, Super String, Glassfish, Star Eater, and Foon Meek. This is, if I recall, a white script fish. Or actually, no, it is a purple script fish. But yeah, it can be caught in this little pool right here. Next, we have Apahelos 18 Alpha. In here, we have Super String, Dragon Scale, Star Eater, Eupipiara, and Eshfornesh. Now, Eshfornesh here is by far the best fish in this area and one of the best fish in the zone because it can be reduced into N-Tide Ether Sand. And at the moment, N-Tide Ether Sand is actually used in 0 recipes. It is not useful at all for now. But I guarantee you that when the master recipes come out in a few weeks, N-Tide Ether Sand is going to be used in a lot of stuff. And historically, I found that the fishing ether sand is really valuable because there's a lot of people that are way too lazy to do fishing. And if you are one of the ones who is willing to put in the work to get Eshfornesh and the other fish that drops it, which we'll be discussing, then you'll be able to make a boatload of gil when that actually comes out, because most people will need to get those recipes, and they will not have any way to get N-Tide Ether Sand outside of buying it with scripts. So definitely a good thing to start investing in, but admittedly, there is a better way than Eshfornesh, which we will discuss in the next zone. And this little pool is the Wellspring of Regret. In here, you can catch Protoflesh, Catopron, Comet Tail, and Aode. Now, this is actually a freshwater spot along with Elegia, the next place we'll talk about, so you'll be using regular freshwater bait instead of the etherochemical bait. And speaking of which, we have Elegia, and this is a general area. It's not just one of these pools. It includes all of them. You can fish at any, and in Elegia, we can catch Protoflesh, Catopron, and Wandering Starscale. Nothing too special here, mostly the same stuff as Wellspring of Regret, but, you know, it's neat, I guess. And for our second to last fishing area, we have Limne 3 Alpha. This thing has Wormhole Worm, Unidentified Flying Biomass 2, Triana, Argonaut, Echinos, Space Bishop, and Alikitos. Now, most of these aren't super important. Some of them are collectibles. Echinos is a purple script fish, but the one that I want to talk about is Space Bishop, because this thing is fucking horrifying. It's kind of hard to see without, like, zooming in really closely, but just look up, like, a really zoomed-in version of Space Bishop, and this thing is just the most grotesque, horrifying thing I have seen in this entire game. Not really important, but I just wanted to mention that because it gave me nightmares when I first saw it. And last, but certainly not least, we have Limne 3 Beta, and that is space fishing off of this island. So you have to stand on this little spot right here. It is in the middle of space, kind of below the big water globe, and a little bit to the south of the abode of the Aetheryte. And as long as you're on this island and you're fishing, you're good to go. So this place is a doozy. The main stuff that you can catch here, aside from the rare things, is Wormhole Worm, Unidentified Flying Biomass, Traina, Horizon Event, EB9318, Unbegotten, and the big boy himself, Phallaina. Now, two things worth noting here. Now, Unbegotten is actually a mooch fish. It actually isn't very important at all. I don't really think it's even turned in for scripts or it's reduced at all. It's just a special fish that can only be caught by mooching. What's annoying is that another fish that can be caught by mooching is Phallaina, and Phallaina is the most expensive purple script fish. Now, most of the other ones that we've mentioned can be turned in for up to, at a max, is the Lunar Deathworm at a top quality, you can get it for 291 purple scripts. At the lowest quality, Phallaina gets turned in at 700 purple scripts. at a top quality, this thing goes for 1,400 purple scripts, which is fucking batshit. Now, the reason for this is because this thing is a pain in the ass to get. First, you need to catch Horizon Events. Then after catching Horizon Events, you need to mooch to get another fish. But this fucking thing, Unbegotten, dilutes the mooch pool. So in order to get this, you're going to want to make sure you use prize catch on every single attempt. You're going to make sure you turn on Collector's Glove, throw this out there, and then you're going to wait. Now, the problem with this is that if I look at the fishing log, there are so many things that can pop up in place of Horizon Event. Phallaina is the same size, EB9318 is the same size, and one thing that you can note is that that is a single exclamation mark. This is a double exclamation mark fish, so I can just preserve my prize catch by making sure that I only actually start catching whenever it's a double exclamation mark. But even within that, there's a chance that I just get a Phallaina, and that's a double exclamation mark, and that screws it up. So once again, single exclamation mark, I cast again, and I have to keep doing this over and over and over until it hits double exclamation mark, and then within that double exclamation mark, I get a Horizon Event. And then after I get that Horizon Event, I have to mooch that, and then from the mooch, I need to land the Phallaina, which not only is diluted because of the Unbegotten, but is also extremely difficult. So if you get this, you're sitting pretty. Oh, and I completely forgot to mention that you can only catch this thing from 10 p.m. to 4 a.m. So this is literally the shortest duration we have for a folklore fish, and that's on top of all the other bullshit you have to go through to actually catch it. And in fact, I'll even include the clip of me actually catching the Phallaina because I lost my fucking mind. It took me so long to actually get it. Event Horizon. Oh, triple exclamation mark, please. Please. Want to be done. I farmed this for too long. Please. Oh! Please don't break. Please don't break. Yeah, boy! That's right. Oh, yeah. I don't even know how to pronounce it. Phallaina? Oh. It's over. God, that fish took me way too fucking long to catch. Oh my god. Let's go. And if you were paying attention earlier, you would recall that I mentioned that there is one new spearfishing spot in Lochs. It is the northeastern Lochs lake bed, and to get to it, we're going to have to go all the way down from the surface. So it's located in this little portion of the map, and in this area of Lochs, we can find the Natron Puffer, the Diamond Dagger, the Queenly Fan, Pale Panther, Salt Squid, and Platinum Hammerhead. Most of these are relatively unimportant, but Salt Squid is used in that one aforementioned Levequest. This is also the only new spearfishing point in Lochs. The others, including the one that I haven't discovered, are all Stormblood spearfishing points. So, not much new here, but it is worth noting that it is something that got added within Endwalker. Now, a spot that is a little bit more important is the Ruby Sea, and the first one we'll be discussing is Northern Onokoro. So as mentioned earlier, this has the Ruby Spotted Crab, which you'll need for one of the Levequests, but it also has Coffer Shell, Onohige, Onokoro Carp, Marrow Eater, and Cloudy Cat Shark. So these nodes are located in this section here. If I dive down, it covers that area by the far red coral, all the way over to this node over here. And there is one more node in this area, that being Northwestern Onokoro, and here you can catch, once again, Ruby Spotted Crab, Dream Pickle, Crownfish, Blue Shark, Shogun's Kabuto, and Pipefish. Some of these are collectible turn-ins, but in order to unlock this, you're going to need to do something similar to what we did in Thavnair. In this case, you're going to need to collect multiple cat sharks, and once you've caught 10 cat sharks, the Northwest Onokoro spot will spawn, and then you can go over there and catch some fish. But Unlike Thavnair, there is no special thing with spearfisher's intuition. Every single fish can be caught by just doing normal spearfishing. You don't need to do any special combos in order to make one of them spawn. The next area in the Ruby Sea is the Asari Slope. I mentioned this one earlier. Here you can catch red gurnad, dream pickle, which is one of the things needed for the Levequests, ruby haddock, crownfish, sword of Asari, and blue shark. This is these three ones that you can see on the mini-map on this little area within the Asari Slope. As mentioned earlier, though, you can catch dream pickle in northwestern Onokoro along with the Asari Slope if you so choose. The next spot is northeastern Beko, and in here you can catch skipping stone, red-spotted blenny, deep-body boarfish, gray mullet, prayer cushion, uzumaki, and kitefin shark. Now, most of these are unimportant, but gray mullet is actually used in some crafting recipes, so you might find some use farming that. The second to last spearfishing spot in Endwalker is Exile. You can find this just south of the Tamamizu teleport point, and in it you can catch Barb of Exile, Smooth Lumpfish, Hell's Cap, Keeled Fugu, Eastern Seerfish, False Fusilier, and Othardian Ross. None of these are incredibly important, but there you go. And while we have reached our last spearfishing spot, and, well, fishing spot in the entire video, I have saved the best for last, because in the Eastern Barrier Isle, we can find Jointed Razorfish, Mini Yasha, Right-Eye Flounder, Othardian Lumpsucker, Saw Shark, and Bluefin Trevally. And the key one here is Othardian Lumpsucker. So, real quick, if I pop over to this teeming water right here, and I start spearfishing, what I'm looking for is the medium fish. So, I want to get that slow medium fish. That is the Othardian Lumpsucker. So that thing right there, Othardian Lumpsucker. This thing right there, Othardian Lumpsucker. Why is this important? Well, as you can see, it is reducible. And, unlike the previous fish, this thing reduces into End Tide Ether Sand. So the same thing that Is Fornesh reduces into, the one that I mentioned earlier. And as I mentioned earlier, there is something better that you can use to get End Tide Ether Sand. That is this. That is the Othardian Lumpsucker. Because 3 End Tide Ether Sand, and this is really easily farmable, just like with the Guild Top Knots from earlier. This is the exact same method, but we are getting End Tide Ether Sand instead of Moonlight Ether Sand. So at the moment, it's a bit tricky because you will be able to get more money from Moonlight Ether Sand, but as I mentioned with East Fornesh, you will be able to get far more money in the future by selling End Tide Ether Sand. So really, it's up to you on whether you want to make a quick buck right now, or whether you want to start investing for the future. But I guarantee you, Othardian Lumpsucker, this is the way to go if you want to start making gil in a few weeks, but you want to really start making gil in a few weeks. But yeah, that's pretty much it. That covers everything in this video. I'm not entirely sure how long it's going to be at this point. I'm hoping that I managed to make it under an hour. I was really trying not to make this go for that long because, goddamn, I wanted to make it a concise guide and it just ended up taking way too long. There's a lot of stuff to cover. I kept adding more and more sections. Initially, I wasn't planning on adding the fishing action section, but I decided to include that because I figured people would want to know what actually changed. But that's it for this. If you found this video helpful, I would greatly appreciate it if you could throw it a like. I will catch you in the next one, and hopefully that one will be just as useful because it's something that I've been working on for weeks.